the show keeps going and it looks like it's reaching its climax. The stars were out for Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Let's go with Trump first. We saw his biggest supporters, of course, wife Melania Trump, Elon Musk, Hulk Hogan and Dr. Phil. What were the takeaways from Madison Square Garden?
Yeah, certainly a big night in New York City, normally considered a Democratic stronghold, but certainly Donald Trump holding a rally there got a lot of eyeballs, got a lot of attention, and arguably one of the most biggest media markets in the world. So Donald Trump himself seemed to deliver somewhat of a closing argument in this address, asking the crowd, asking supporters if they were better off now than they were 4 years ago. That's normally what U.S. politicians ask every 4 years during a presidential election. But, it's not necessarily that message that's making the headlines today. There were actually a number of inflammatory remarks made in part some by Trump, but also by his guest speakers at last night's rally that are drawing quite a bit of controversy here in the United States. There was one speaker that referred to Puerto Rico, a U.S. territory, as an island of garbage that elicited backlash not only from Democrats, but also from a number of Republicans and Trump allies. It came just hours after Kamala Harris was campaigning in predominantly Puerto Rican neighborhoods in West Philadelphia and Philadelphia itself earlier in the day. You also heard former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani making pretty inflammatory remarks about Palestinians and Palestinian children. So, it's this rally in its entirety. I don't know how much it did to appeal to swing undecided voters who, you may not like Donald Trump's rhetoric, but may prefer his policies over that of Vice President Kamala Harris's. But we do know that Democrats are certainly going to take these remarks to make their closing arguments as well in the coming days.
Yeah, of course, that comment coming from the comedian Tony Hinchcliffe, and then, as you say, Rudy Giuliani as well. Well, what does this tell us about the Trump campaign and I suppose the amount of control they have over the messaging that they wish to put out in massive rallies like this in New York, for instance?
Yeah, so it's interesting because conventional wisdom would tell us that this is, a major mistake, that this is sort of reckless or seems reckless on the outset. But, you have to wonder, does the Trump campaign feel confident in their base? Do they feel that, this rhetoric that oftentimes does rally up and excite their base, is this their strategy? It comes at a time when I think you're seeing, particularly among men and young men in the U.S., a lack of enthusiasm for Kamala Harris. And I'm curious if they feel that this sort of rhetoric is a way to sort of animate parts of their base. But like I said, it's sort of, you can look at an election two ways. You obviously have the base. That's very important to a campaign. You need the base to turn out. But there's 6 to 8% of undecided voters here in the United States that could decide the election in those 7 key battleground states. And it's really unclear, and I'm skeptical that any of this language is ultimately going to do anything for them.
Now, Kamala Harris was in Republican country, Texas, a very tough place for a Democrat, but she had huge backup vocals in the form of Beyonce, also from Texas. But as far as I understand, Beyonce has not been one for political rallies. I think this is the first time she actually spoke at a rally. I understand that she sang during Hillary Clinton's campaign. So how influential can she be?
Yeah, so we know that Beyonce is someone who supports Democrats. She sang during, Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, but also during former President Barack Obama's inaugural ball. So she's someone who is very much allied with former Democratic presidents. But when it comes to this, campaign stop in particular, first of all, Texas is Beyonce's home state, so she certainly has a big connection there. Her mother spoke at this rally as well. But also, the decision to choose Texas has to do with the state's very restrictive abortion ban. And the message of abortion access has become key to the Democratic platform. So you had someone like Beyonce sort of backing that up and talking about that message. I don't think Kamala Harris, Beyonce, or any Democrat thinks that Democrats are necessarily going to flip the state, but this is about amplifying that message on abortion. Now, I will say there's a very competitive Senate race in Texas against Senator Ted Cruz, a former presidential candidate from 2016. There is an opportunity for Democrats there, though it's going to be very tight.
And speaking of tight contests, where are we at with the latest polling?
So look, we are 8 days out, and I would say that this race is very much within the margin of error. So you have at the national level, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris tied neck and neck. But I would encourage people, your viewers interested in U.S. politics and following this along, to pay more attention to those 7 key battleground states: Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania. These states are going to decide the presidential election. And we see that Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are within really 1 to 3 points of each other on average in most of these states. That's within the margin of error. Now, the narrative in the U.S. media and polling over the past few weeks or so has been that Donald Trump has the momentum. That is certainly true. However, we are seeing very high early voting numbers coming in from North Carolina and Georgia, for example. Conventional wisdom tells us that would favor Democrats. Democrats seem confident in that. That being said, though, Republicans have also been pushing their base to get out and vote early. So it is neck and neck. People ask me who I think is going to win this all the time. And quite frankly, I don't know. This is going to be tight.
Very much so. Just one more interesting development that we have seen is that the 2 major mastheads, the Washington Post and the LA Times, deciding not to endorse a candidate this time round. We know that the Post's editor-at-large has also quit because the paper won't endorse Kamala Harris. What's behind this move from the papers?
You know, it's certainly been a major point of contention within the political media community here in Washington, D.C., and really across the country. I think you're seeing newspapers, their editorial boards, I should say, take a more cautious approach. It's drawing quite a bit of backlash from Democrats in particular, wanting them to endorse. But, overall, I think there is a concern that oftentimes media consumers, and I can speak to this from the United States, don't necessarily understand the difference between an editorial board and a newsroom, that the newsroom itself is not endorsing, it is the editorial board. So I would encourage, everyone looking into this story not to punish the journalists, the objective, hardworking journalists from the newsroom for the actions of the editorial board. We're seeing a number of subscriptions being cut and people, cutting their subscriptions to the Washington Post and the LA Times. So we'll see if this trend continues. Other major newspapers have endorsed, but it is certainly making headlines.
Okay, Julia, Manchester, always good to get your thoughts, especially on this election where the results are completely unpredictable as it stands. Thanks very much.
Thank you.